Okay. I'm Mike Baker. I'm a real estate agent with Compass in New York City. Primarily, I work and sell and rent and do transactions in Manhattan, in all of the five boroughs. So, what is interesting and what I just wanted to update everybody on are the things that I'm seeing trends wise, um, as well as um, not only in the sales market but also in the rental market, which I think is like some very unique things are happening that I think we need to pay attention to and take notice of, because I think over time it's important to figure out where this is headed. And obviously, when you think about big picture, we're in this position where um, inflation is, it's not so much out of control, but it's extremely high. And most of us are feeling that budget wise, whether we're traveling or buying groceries or doing anything of any type of leisure, right? So, um, what that has led to is housing inflation. And housing inflation is a very important part of the consumer price index. So, when we see inflation getting away from us, that is a very specific piece to that. And what we've seen over the last year or two are annual increases of 20, 30% in some of these markets year over year. And that year over year number is 20% compounding 2 years in a row. And what that means is that for a lot of us that are renting or we're buying, things are much more expensive than they were. And not only are they expensive on that end, they're expensive with the financing. And if you didn't get a mortgage in the 3% range, right, even as recently as last year, or earlier this year, you're now looking at mortgage rates that are at 5.79, 5.8%. And that makes things very expensive. And when you think about every percentage point that's added is another 10% to your mortgage payment. So we're almost 3% higher than we were a year ago, if not a little bit more. And that is putting buyers in a position to take a break. Now, both sides of the coin, both things can happen. Either sellers adjust to this and you start to see price reductions, or um, and we drive ourselves into a recession just because so many things, just people shut their wallets, or rates go up and continue to go up a little bit more toward the end of the year. So buyers have to make the decision as to what they want to do. And my advice to almost everybody is, if you find something you love, buy it. You're in a position now that there are far fewer of you than there were 6, 7, 8 months ago, and there's a lot less competition. And if you find something that you love, and right now it's already a little bit cheaper than it was, simply because of sellers coming to the realization that they're not going to get what they initially wanted, then you now have the ability to get a discount to what the market was a year ago. And then over time, we don't know where interest rates go. Um, you, I would expect over the long term, before you ever leave that house, let's say you're in it for 7 to 10 years, you will have another opportunity to refinance at a lower rate. Lower rates should come not necessarily for the greatest reason, simply because we'll probably hit a recession if we get into when the Fed starts to drop their Fed funds rate. But I know already from the peak interest rates more recently at the end of June, they've already come down about a point. So I always say, buying a home is an emotional decision. Yes, the math sometimes works out, but 9 times out of 10, if you can afford something and you can afford it today, I would buy, because emotionally it makes a ton of sense. Financially, it not always, but emotionally it does. And then when rates come back, and the long-term trend of rates is to go down, when the rates come back to us, then you can refinance and go back to the bank. Um, if you don't buy and you buy at that point when rates are already down and they're back down to 3%, we're going to have seen something else that would have caused that to happen. And that something else is probably a recession. That something else is probably job loss. That something else is probably things outside of our control. So it's not all, housing, people in housing and buyers. Obviously, we want things to go down. interest rates, mind you. Sellers also want them to go down because it makes their property worth a little bit more. But that typically means there's going to be some kind of shock that's going to cause that. That is going to cause a lot more pain or a lot of pain to some people. So that's something I would think about. As far as sellers are concerned, what I'm seeing as far as inventory wise, what I'm seeing in New York City specifically is inventory is not climbing. It's actually month over month down. Our expectation would have been we're going to see a lot of inventory that has come on over the summer. Now, I don't know what the other markets are like. I know you are seeing inventory climbing year over year relative to last year in specific markets like Phoenix and Idaho and that kind of thing. You will continue to see those things. Now, New York is a little different, I think, and we'll see how this plays out. New York's a little different in that I think a lot of people just relax over the summer, and we're not going to see the same inventory climb yet that that the rest of the country has seen. I'm waiting to see what happens in September. My assumption is going to be that you're going to see a lot of inventory climbing then. Now, what's been happening is inventory has come down, but the permanently off market, which is essentially to me either expired or sellers just decided not to do it at all, that has been climbing month over month, week over week a lot. And those people, if they were real sellers in the first place, which I assume, let's just assume that all of them are, they're going to come back, and they're probably going to come back in September after Labor Day. Let's just take a break. I don't want anyone in my apartment. I don't want to have to keep it clean every 2 seconds. Let's just take it off the market and we'll put it back on in September. Now, a couple problems with that, at least on the seller's perspective, is that it takes a specific amount of days off the market for the days on market to reset. And if I remember correctly, it's 90. So they've got to sit off market for 90 days before it resets. So everything that comes back on isn't going to go back to the top of Street Easy. You'll be toward the bottom. Anyone that hasn't listed in this time frame is going to come on with a fresh perspective in 0 days on market. So it's going to be newer. Anyone that's been buying and looking right now, I consider to be very serious because they're not off in Mykonos partying. So those are things. Now, the sellers that aren't taking their stuff off the market, there's only so much that you can do. However, get ahead of pricing, figure out, and this is important for me to watch, is that where are new apartments that are similar coming on? Are they coming on where I'm priced? Are they coming on below where I'm priced? I assume is what's going to happen. You might have some sellers that are still thinking it's early 2022 and 2021, and they're going to come on above me. So it's going to be this competitive environment, I think, and it'll be interesting to see where buyers come in. At what point do they adjust to interest rates? At what point do they not care anymore? Because this is the reality, and the shock is over, summer's over, and that kind of thing. Or if rates do come down a little bit, which they don't exactly track the Fed funds rate if you follow it that much. If rates do come back some, at what point at what rate do you start to see activity really pick up? Do you start to go from a couple showings a week to 5? Do you start to have to schedule open houses, that kind of thing? So those are things that I'm watching. One other thing that I think is driving this market is also the rental market. So typically you will have renters will move into a phase of their life so that they decide to buy. When they're moving into that phase, they typically have a lot of money by normal standards to buy something, right? So if I'm looking at a co-op and it's $1 million, I typically have to have at least $200,000 in cash and money left over after the fact. If interest rates have scared me so much that I don't want to buy, what do I do instead? I rent. And when I rent, I got a lot of money to play with. Not only did I have enough money to save $200,000, but I also had a little bit above and beyond that. And now I can drive the price of the rental market up, which is a possibility. I haven't seen anywhere where this is played out data-wise, but I do have some really interesting anecdotally high-income earners looking at very inexpensive properties in Hell's Kitchen specifically, and also on the east side. So that's one reason that this market can be changing and the rental market is doing what it's doing. It's just chaos. And right now, July, August is supposed to be the high tide as far as inventory is concerned. And we are sitting at under 7,000, at least on Street Easy, under 7,000 units available, whereas you're looking at 15,000 just a couple months ago. This is supposed to be the high time and the highest availability. It's just not the case. So where is this inventory coming from? I don't know any landlords, and I have a few just two that I work with specifically that are holding apartments on the off the market for a better day. Especially right now, this is the greatest probably rental market that they'll ever see or they've seen, and they're trying to take advantage with these empty apartments and vacancies and people turning over and stuff like that. Because you're getting 20-30% more than you were getting last year, and last year was really pushing the envelope as far as prices were concerned. And now, not only are you getting 30% more, but you're also not having to pay the broker's fee that you had to pay for the last 2 or 3 years. So, I think I don't see an end as far as tenants are concerned, unfortunately. I don't see an end to brokers' fees. Now, are we going to be able to charge, and you have some brokers or agents charging 20% of the first year? I don't think so. But you might still get the 15% that was pretty normal in 2019 before all of this happened. So those are just things that I'm watching. How is this rental market going to play out for the remainder of the year, the back half of the year? At what point do interest rates start to move up or down? Right now, they've come down a little bit just because of the demand of interest rates is so, the demand for mortgages has died, basically, right? As we start to get more, a lower number, whenever that does happen, when do buyers and the largest cohort of buyers ever, when do they start to jump back in and say, screw it, I'll take my low 5% or high 4% interest rate, and I'll refinance when the time comes. I can afford it. I have a job. I haven't lost my job, etc. I'm in tech, whatever. And at what point do sellers start to change their expectations? Are the new sellers that come on in September that have never put their apartment on the market at all, they've just been watching and they know that it's not the greatest time to sell and that they need to be very realistic. They're listening to their agents. Do they start to come on at a lower average price than you would have seen last year where you're at now? Do the sellers that have been on or taking their apartments off the market, taking the summer off, do they bring their apartments back on at reasonable prices or lower? And then the people that just stuck it out and been trying to sell this whole time, do those people how do they manage the buyer pool, the new sellers, the sellers that took the summer off, that kind of thing? And then do renters again start to decide, I got enough money, let's buy. Really, that's the American dream, thinking about it that way. Anyone that is renting right now that decided, let's just take the time off, they still got a 12-month lease or 10-month lease. You're probably not going to see that turnover until the spring market. So if the buyer pool is shrinking because I'm locking myself up into a lease, how does this market play out? Right now, inventory is down. Does inventory tick back up in September, October? That is my assumption. That is my thought process. That's my thesis. We'll see how that plays out. I don't think renters that have been renting this entire time, I don't think they come back in until spring 2023. And I think there's going to be a lot of competition among sellers that I need to move and I need to get out. Or in certain inventory and certain assets, do you start to see people just decide I'm going to sublet it for a year or two, let it play out? I did have an owner do that last in Q4 of 2021, and they've done extremely well, renting their space, subletting their space, and they'll probably put it on the market come spring. So that's my update right. Wow, that's my update right now. Excuse my cracking voice. Excuse me if there's AC in the back, but that's just kind of what I'm watching and how I'm thinking about things. If we had taken out, and this is something that I heard nationwide, this has happened. If you take out 2020 and 2021, if you took it out, I think sellers would be looking at this market like, hey, this is great, especially relative to before when you had the average days on market was 90 days. And now it's in the 50s. But I think, again, it's more, what have you done for me lately? And when it's so much, I have friends and family and all of those types of things that have done so well in this market as sellers. I'm anchoring to that, and I don't care what happened in 2019. But from an agent, when you zoom out, and I had this post a while ago, when you zoom out and look at things and put them in perspective, things are pretty good. And it's now more of a neutral market, and I think that's better in the long term for everybody involved, especially buyers that are trying to get into their first property, sellers, selling and buying a new property, and also the real estate agents. I think it keeps everything in balance, and balance is good. So that's it for now. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can reach me at michael.baker, michael.baker, Baker, at compass.com. I appreciate you watching, and I'll talk to you soon.